Um, I always come at things very pragmatically. It's just my nature, my education, my training. But I was looking at this map and considering the dates that you really started this. There's a lot here that's pretty interesting, that you've been in this for, depending on promising practices or state schools, somewhere between 6, 7, 8 years, you know, depending on which one you want to talk about. But you've reached approximately, looking at the red here, a third of the state. I mean, just ballpark figures, I would say, if the red indicates where you have made at least some inroads. So that seems great for an all-volunteer organization in that period of time. That's pretty impressive. I think what you want is a critical mass. You know, there's a point at which you're rolling the big thing up the hill, and then it's gaining energy, and then boom, it takes off, and it can do a lot once it starts rolling down. You know, and how that critical mass happens. I think partly, yes, the people you want to get to are the big districts who are saying, whoever the next person comes in MPS, that person can say, hey, I don't really quite get all this, but I'm going to take 7 schools, MPS schools per year, and put them through this training. Then you all come back, and that's something like what you would need. You need to get into the big, it's a bigger slog when you go wonderful little primary school to wonderful little primary school. And I was thinking, again, that pragmatism of mine that always surfaces, that the best thing I think you have to sell is that you could save these school districts tons and tons and tons of money. That just sort of came through to me this morning listening to all this. You can get rid of those 14 assistant principals who do nothing but handle discipline. You can get through that armed guard from the police department at every door. You can save the poor janitor his dignity and time, and he can be planting flowers. I mean, there's a pragmatism to what you're doing. And I've been involved with this. Somehow I never caught that. I don't know if I'm getting way away from what you would like, but there's pragmatism to this.
It is at the same time, to make this work, you also need people to make it work. And what I see in some of the schools that have gone down this direction, the role of the people within the school changes. So they don't necessarily save bodies, but they might custodial force, or they might on the people checking people into the building. But as far as assistant principals and things like that, at Milwaukee College Prep, the school that I studied, it is not unusual to have 4 administrators go through any individual classroom in a day. They might only be there 2 or 3 minutes. Maybe they're there 10 minutes. But there's this constant movement of checking and looking. They have a thing they call grows and glows, where as they walk out of the building or out of the room, there's a little place that they can just drop this card and you say, really liked what you did on XYZ, or see me about this. I'd like to talk more about this with you. But what that does is to keep the teacher's mind on, this is important. My administrators believe it's important, and it's something that I have to think about on a regular, consistent basis. So instead of having the dean of discipline, maybe the dean now is taking hold of
the dean of
aspect.
love, the dean of roses.
Well, one of our schools I characterize as a love them to death school.
Exactly.
I mean, every kid gets a hug on the way into school in the morning. Every child has a chance to say something to an adult about how their time between the 2 days of school came out. and all the way up to 8th grade, where it's a handshake maybe instead of a hug, but it's that same thing. And those relationships are build and they become strong. So I don't know that you can save them money in that way.
No, but I
you
didn't
can
mean
change
to
how
go
they-
in and fire all of those assistant principals, but you can repurpose
Yes.
those people
Yes.
to do something.
Yeah,
I-
to really
I went
improve
to a-
curriculum, for instance.
Yes.
Yeah, an unnamed, I will not name the high school, and this has been some time ago. There was a row of offices for assistant principals, and then having had 2 sons, I know how boys can act sometimes, but I mean, these poor little kids, they were lined up outside these assistant principals' offices, waiting to get their heads chopped off, you know. And I just thought, and my heart just sunk. There has to be a better purpose for, you don't go to graduate school and become an assistant principal to chop little kids' heads off, I hope. You know, and I was thinking of saving all this money.
It's common sense that
Yeah.
if the children or whoever you're involved with are controlling themselves, that life is better for everybody.
Exactly.
It's very hard. I mean,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
have prisons for the people who can't control themselves.
Right.
And so we need to teach this self-control. We need to teach these values to students. And I think years ago, our society was pretty values-based, and schools didn't have to do that. So they didn't really learn to do it very well. And now, I think the thing that Elaine said, you have to reach out beyond the students, even to families. One of the one school that I studied, every teacher has a cell phone, and the parents of every child have that cell phone number at home, and they can call them practically 24/7. And I interviewed one mother, and she said, well, my daughter and I got in this huge fight, and I didn't know what to do, so I called up Mrs. So-and-so, and we talked. She told me how to back off. She then talked to my daughter about values, basically, and respect for parents, etc. Got her to back off. And then we both met with her after school and talked it through. That's above and beyond maybe the call, but the fact that they're willing to do that and that they see their role as reaching out beyond just the student at school gives you an idea of what really helps.
Yeah, 80% of the best and the brightest students in the country on survey say that they cheat in high school. And this is the best and the brightest. That used to be 40% 15 or 20 years ago. We have our prisons, we have the highest rate of prison population in the world. So the system that we've been using needs some adjustments.
Big time.
Well, it's so endemic, this lack of values in our culture. I'd have to just state that. I mean, you look at what is the largest influencing media and movies. I mean, it's just tracked, but those are the things that really influence people, young people. And, you know, what is it's all about getting away with it, the storylines, right? I mean, I'm just kind of speaking off the top too, but it really is. If you track all these films, it's all about how can we get away with it. So there's such a lack of character modeling in the entertainment industry. I mean, it's just become, I think it's very challenging for young people to navigate their way.
When we create situations that promote that, because they know that their scores on tests, their GPA, is what's going to get them into, quote, the college they want to go to.
Right.
And we don't focus enough on their individual growth and how they become a better learner rather than just a better test taker.
Right. Well, this is just my personal commentary, but it makes me think about the moment no child was left behind and a system was set up where schools had a punitive system in place. What is the model for that for young people to even see?
Exactly.
You know, if you're starting to go downhill, will we help? No, we will punish.
Right.
You know, this has been decades long now.
Right.
And so that's why this is just so positive and refreshing, and you hope it would be able to counter decades long of wrong messaging.
Even when you look at Deming's statistical control, he indicated was if people do not have control, they then try to cheat because they don't know how to influence the system. And that's one of the more difficult things that we're facing with some of what we're doing in schools.
Which is why if you have schools where the kids have some say in what should be the school rules and how should we deal with offenses, then they're putting their energy into that. When I was teaching high school, one of my colleagues said, we should get a list of everything that kids could do wrong and the consequences. And I said, oh no. Because they would figure out something that wasn't on the list.
That's right.
That's far worse than anything we can think of.
Ideas.
You know, we give them ideas. And it's far better to have them say, what kind of school do we want to be? How do we want to behave? How do we want to treat each other? You know, and their natural propensity, I think, is often to create even more rigorous expectations than we might.
The schools that are succeeding teach kids what to do rather than what not to do.
Right.
So I have a question. Is there a strong element of peer-to-peer teaching in the schools? I mean, at our university here, that is emphasized a fair amount, that, you know, a young person who acquires a skill or understanding then turns around and teaches it. A very collaborative type of learning.
Depends on the school.
Well, our university's library where I work, we have this learning commons, and that is recognizing, and we're talking about university now level, but it's recognizing how strong of a reinforcer that is for the student who's learned and teaching someone else. So I guess at the younger levels, that may not be so possible, right?
You see it in a lot of the schools that do character education, though, because they have, there are more choices often for kids in how they do projects, and they work together, and it's that notion from the INTESC standards of respectful interaction.
Okay.
There's an author who's coming to LACES next spring, Ron Berger, whose book is An Ethic of Excellence, and in his fourth grade classroom, where he taught for 20 years, his students took on major projects, but they learned how to give each other feedback, and they would do multiple revisions of the big projects that they did, which is a on the way to performance character. But if kids learn to work with each other and support each other's learning by saying, you know, Bob, you could improve that by doing this, and then Bob improves it, doesn't take away from me, you know, which is against that. I've got to get a better score than Bob so I can get into my school of choice. But if we're invested in each other's success, which is largely how we operate at Alverno, then there's a lot of support for learning and a support for ethical behavior as well at the school. So I think you're onto something there.
Several of the schools that I've worked with have cross-age tutoring.
Yeah.
Okay.
And years ago, when I was principal, talking about prior to 1980, we had a cross-age tutoring group. And one day I'm walking down the hall, and this boy who I had often seen in my office because of some problems was walking down just with a glow. And I stopped and talked to him, and I said, why are you so happy? He said, well, you know, I was down working with the first graders. And we were working on mathematics, and I explained this thing to the other little boy, and he looked up at me and said, you are so smart, I want to be just like you. And he said, nobody has ever told me that in my life until then. So the rewards of
Yes,
directions.
absolutely, absolutely.
Any other questions? Excellent. That's
Good.
excellent.
Yes. Thanks for being a very active, if small audience.
Certainly, yeah. Well,
Spread the word.
definitely. Thank you.